June 20th, 2011, Incheon International Airport. The day Richard Gere arrives in Korea. Various TV and newspaper reporters have set up their equipment at the arrival gate to film his arrival. It is the first time that the internationally acclaimed Hollywood star, Richard Gere, and his family visits Korea. His wife, Carrie Rowell, famous for a role as a 007 Bond girl, and his son, Homer Gere, an identical copy of his father, accompanies him. Richard Gere, who has always been interested in Korean Buddhism, states that this trip to Korea is much more special because he is accompanied with his family. This time, he did not tour Asia to promote his films, but came to Korea as a humble guest to experience the Korean culture and Buddhism, and as a photographer. The following day, as a devout Buddhist, Richard Gere visited the Choge Temple, the headquarters for the Choge Order of Korean Buddhism. Richard Gere has been practicing Buddhism under the guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for over 30 years. In a previous interview, it has been said that he has always been interested in traditional Korean temples, the ancient traditions and practices of Korean Sun Buddhism. He came to the Dharma Hall to prostrate to the statue of Buddha. Richard Gere expresses his hope for world peace as he signed, "May all sentient beings live in peace and happiness," in the message book of the Choge Temple. After his private audience with his teacher, the Buddha, in the Dharma Hall of the Choge Temple, Richard Gere and his family met with the head of Choge Order, Venerable Chasung.
My wife, Carrie, the head of the order. My son, Homer. Come over, say hello.
Very good looking.
Yes. And this is for you. This is from humble visitors who have come from the U.S. This is our first time in Korea. First temple in Korea. So we're very happy to be here. And thank you.
처음으로 이렇게 한국에 와가지고 초청해주셔서 너무 감사하고.
This is a photograph that I took many years ago in the Tibetan communities.
Wow, it's beautiful.
These are the kind of photographs that are in the exhibit that I'm showing.
이번에 전시하는 그 사진이 이러한
Please accept this gift.
선물로 받으신. Yeah, this is incense burner.
Ah, very nice.
It's a lotus flower today.
Yeah. You know, my wife is a ceramicist.
Oh,
she
she
does
is.
pottery.
그럼 요 모양들 한번
See if you can, make this shape.
No, I'm not that good. That's very beautiful.
Yeah, but this is wonderful.
Yeah, this is just stick.
하나만 Your own, buddy.
나갈 때 드린다고.
This is Korean style.
Thank you.
Yes.
So how many beads and rings are?
So I just want to point it out that the three marks here is the symbol of Choge Order,
I see.
the Dharma, the Sangha, and the
Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
Yes. And then the other side is the name of the president. Actually.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Okay.
Affinity.
Thank you.
Even though it was a brief meeting, it served as a wonderful opportunity to introduce the beauty of Korean Buddhism. Moreover, it was a meeting in where all participants transcended race and nation and felt genuine friendship within the gentle gaze of our common teacher, the Buddha. After the meeting, Richard Gere visited the Central Buddhist Museum located within the temple.
현재 가장 그 시대가 올라가는 그런 고려 사경으로서는 1006년에 만들어진 경전도 남아 있습니다.
We have one of the oldest.
He seemed very delighted to see the Lotus Sutra of the 11th century. Richard Gere was unable to take his eyes off the ancient Buddhist history and cultural legacy of Korean Buddhism, as he discussed the various differences of Tibetan and Korean Buddhism with the accompanying monks. His eyes sparkled as he submerged himself in the Korean Choge Order's Sun Buddhist culture.
This is one of the most traditional Korean way of
글씨나 그림, 무늬 따위들을 그대로 복제할 때 쓰는 그런 기법입니다.
As the Korean monastic teaches Richard Gere how to print the Korean traditional Buddhist pattern using the traditional printing device, he smiles with delight.
Well, this was also very auspicious, as I was saying before, to be here in a Zen temple because my first teachers were Zen. So my first introduction to Buddhism was through Zen.
zen 전통이 있다라는 것을 들었습니다.
It seems as though Richard Gere is slowly building up unforgettable memories with his family at the Choge Temple.
저것도 같이
Maybe they can put some paper out. That's okay. Thank you.
June 22nd, 2011, the day of the official press conference regarding Richard Gere's photo exhibition, Pilgrim.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here today.
오늘 여기 와주셔서 모두에게 감사드립니다.
You're very kind.
너무너무 친절하시네요.
On your busy day to come here, I'm very happy.
굉장히 바쁘실 텐데 와주셔서 굉장히 감사드립니다.
I think it's impossible to look at these photographs and not realize the extraordinary suffering of the Tibetan people. But I think when you see these photographs, you have to be aware of the political situation there to understand really the depth of where I was coming from in offering them in this exhibition.
After the press conference, Richard Gere makes his way to the gallery where his works are exhibited.
1, 2, 3.
To shed light upon the Pilgrim exhibition, Korean actor Yoon Jung-hee accompanies Richard Gere.
I hope you all enjoy the show of these photographs. And maybe take a little time with them and realize that these are real people and complex people in a very difficult situation, in a very beautiful place, but they need our help very much right now.
Pilgrim has successfully toured 11 countries and 20 cities and finally made its way to Korea. Even to this day, many Tibetans risk their life to leave their homeland. His photographs portray the extraordinary pain of the lives of the Tibetan people. Richard Gere captures the purity of the Tibetan people and the beautiful landscape of Tibet. His loving kindness and pure mind as a pilgrim to the rooftop of the world can be seen through the expressiveness and richness of his photographs. In 1991, Richard Gere established the Gere Foundation to preserve and promote the Tibetan culture and to alleviate the suffering of the Tibetan people. Even with his busy schedule, Richard Gere accepted BTN's offer for an exclusive interview. Richard Gere continues to spread the Buddha Dharma through the use of media, thus showed special interest in BTN.
Okay, so let's get started with this. So
beautiful. So I think that's where it's great.
Thank you. Thank
I
you
feel
so
like
much.
you're an old friend already.
Yeah, me
This
too.
is really good.
Yeah.
No, I feel very relaxed with you. This is
Thank you. Yes. And thank you so much for coming and agreeing to have an interview with the Buddhist Television Network. Is this your first visit to Korea?
It's the first other than the airport, yeah.
Ah, I see. So
Not first time.
Okay. You are the most well-known and famous Buddhist lay person in the West.
Yeah, thank you for qualifying.
But for many Korean people, they do not know that you had strong affinity with Buddhism. So for those viewers, could you please tell us a little bit how you first became interested in Buddhism, and also how you have decided to become fully committed Buddhist lay person?
This is quite a long story. So
just the gist
I'm going to give you the short version of this. I was always interested in existential questions.
In your 20s?
From the time I was a small boy.
Oh, okay.
I remember myself, whatever issues I was going through, I remember at night lying in my backyard looking up at the stars. And feeling the immensity of the universe. And I know for some people it might make them feel bad, that immensity.
Right.
But it always made me feel good
to
feel the immensity, the vastness of it. And I never really had a context for giving it meaning. The religion that I grew up with was quite very compassionate. My father and mother, both very religious people. They were Methodists, Protestants, and very compassionate, very all-inclusive. Everyone was their friend.
That's great.
Everybody. Didn't matter what religion they were, what color they were, where they came from. Everyone was invited to our house as a brother and a sister. So that was a wonderful upbringing. But I do remember that as I became a late teenager in my early 20s, that the question of the nature of existence, the nature of self, the nature of identity, the nature of consciousness were questions that I had. And my explorations took me directly to Buddhism. Because of course that's what the Buddha was trying to discover for himself. Was what am I? What is a sentient being? What is the universe? What's reality? And as the Dalai Lama says, and any other great teacher, all these religions are wonderful, as long as they're based on love and compassion. And the specific personality type that I was, I think, has a great affinity for Buddhism. I think modern men and women, I think, have a great affinity for Buddhism because it requires you to question and inquire constantly. To not accept anything by faith, but really look at it carefully, 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 always going deeper, deeper, deeper.
So in
and
Buddhism,
I find that very modern.
Yeah, it's, especially in Buddhism, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have a doubt.
No, doubt is important. Yeah, to not accept. But really to listen to the inner self that is always questioning.
That's right.
Always questioning. You know, when I know in in your form of Buddhism, Chan Buddhism, and I forget what you call it here.
Son Buddhism.
Song Buddhism. This question of doubt becomes very important.
That's right.
I call it a dissonance. The dissonance between what you feel in your heart, deep inside of you, and what your senses tell you. The surface reality, surface consciousness tells you. And there is a dissonance.
That's right.
You know, it's not the same thing.
Right.
The surface reality is very, very thin and unreliable.
Yeah.
That deeper sense, the deeper wisdom inside, you know, is something that you can always trust.
And like, what kind of daily, Buddhist practice have you been doing? And have you ever thought about being a Buddhist monastic?
To being a monastic?
Yes.
Yeah. I think everyone kind of has a romance with Buddhism that they're going to become Milarepa.
Right.
Right. And I'm going to find a cave, and I'm going to find my Marpa.
That's right.
And,
my teachers.
And that's it. That's what I'm going to do the rest of my life, and become enlightened. Of course, enlightenment is very difficult.
Right.
And the more one realizes how far one has to go.
Right. And the tricky part is the more you try to pursue enlightenment, the farther you get. So it's really...
It's humbling.
Yes.
But it's a good kind of humbling. And yeah, I think at a certain point, we were talking about this the other day, about this movie that I made, Hachiko. This sense of, in the end, you just have to do the practice without any expectations whatsoever. A certain amount of trust, because you can witness your mind starting to change. And if it's not really the mind itself changing, it's that you are able to penetrate layers of mind, layers of consciousness that are more truthful. They're closer to reality. And you can see this in the days, months, years, decades of meditative practice.
Yes.
You can feel that happening.
Right.
And as that happens, of course, there's more patience, there's less anger, there's more real sense of empathy and sympathy for other beings. I think it emerges naturally in the process. But it is humbling to realize that you can't be thinking, I'm going to be enlightened tomorrow. Right. Or the next session of meditation, I'm going to leave my body.
Right, quick enlightenment.
This doesn't happen.
Right. So what particular practice have you been doing?
Well, the Tibetans are my teachers. The Dalai Lama is one of my teachers, but I also have 20 other teachers. And the form is tantric, highest yoga tantra, it's called. The basis is Mahayana Buddhism, definitely Mahayana. It's very specific practices that have to do with recitation and visualizations, but also non-conceptual as well. So in some sense, through deity practice of conceiving,
deity yoga, yes.
Conceiving a deity in its perfect form. And I don't know how much to talk about Tantra in a show
so
like this.
how many like Wang or the initiation have you received? Many. Okay. Do you think, being a Buddhist or...
By the way, I don't know much about this.
Okay.
So I don't want to be presenting myself as any kind of a master or a teacher.
Okay, got it.
I'm a student.
Okay, good.
And a very humble student. Okay?
Okay. Does your Buddhist practice help you to become a better actor in any way? Is there any correlation?
I never think of it that way. It's not, I suppose, everything in life becomes more open. I think more rich, more subtle, more perceptive. So of course, your work, or creative work especially, whether it's acting or music or whatever it may be, I think probably gets better in the process. Maybe more generous, the emotions and ideas maybe flow a little bit easier. You don't have to push or work so hard.
Struggle.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any favorite passage? We talked about yesterday about Nagarjuna and Madhyamika. And is there any particular philosophy or passage in a scripture that you recite or remember?
Oh, there's so many. But
There's
look,
so many.
to me, the constantly being reminded of my Bodhisattva vows,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably the most important part of practice of setting the motivation very clearly. Every session, but every day, every breath, monitoring the mind and making it clear to yourself, absolutely clear with as much courage as you can muster, that you really are coming from a selfless place. And you're engaging that false idea of self-concern, self-preservation, and constantly making war with that in the most honest, absolutely strict way one possibly can, is probably the most deeply important thing of any practice that I have done. So without that bodhicitta that's generated from the bodhisattva vow, everything becomes dry and meaningless. Even if you were to evolve some siddhas, some special abilities, they would be meaningless.
That's right.
Meaningless without that motivation.
Right.
It's pure motivation.
It's only going to promote your ego if you.
It's
if you
dangerous.
Forget. Yeah, it is dangerous.
These practices, Buddhist practices, Hindu practices, these are very powerful yogic processes that, and one has to be very careful with them.
Right. Would you like to come back as an actor next life, or is there any other,
I mean, honestly, I don't know that I've even resolved that I'm an actor in this lifetime.
I see.
Although I think probably we're all acting a little bit.
That's
right?
right.
You're acting the role of a monk.
Exactly.
I'm acting the role of a movie actor.
Right.
We all play these little games with ourselves.
Let's talk about your photography.
Yeah.
Photographs, and your photographs are breathtakingly beautiful, and they're like a visual, like a metaphor. It invites people to see not only what's visible but also what is not visible. So, like for example, it's very clear that those your photographs reveal daily tragedy and suffering, and the resilience and also hope and joy of Tibetan people. Yeah. But at the same time, I also sense emptiness and impermanence, and also a sense of nostalgia and warmth and intimacy. So like.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So could you please tell us what made you decide to work on this particular project, and why did you name the whole exhibition Pilgrims?
Well, I didn't set out to make this show.
Oh, okay.
I just took photographs to please myself.
Oh, okay.
And I started to evolve my style, whatever that is. I mean, many of these photographs were taken almost 30 years ago, and I can see the images that I still respond to are closest to what my thing is, whatever my thing is.
So this is like deeply, personal.
Deeply personal,
okay.
Yeah. I had no intention of showing these things to anybody. And it really started with a friend of mine who started Tibet House, New York with me.
Right.
And we were trying to think of ways to raise some money for the projects we were doing. And she had seen some of my photographs and was very kind and generous about them. She said, look, I think we could raise a lot of money if you want to sell these.
Right.
And I had to think very hard about this because it was something deeply personal.
That's right.
But my motivation was pure in this.
Right.
I mean, it's all a giveaway.
Right.
And it was all for my Tibetan brothers and sisters, but also for anyone else who looks at them. Hopefully they would have a response like yours, which is exactly what I would hope.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. That makes me very happy.
Okay, good.
So as it evolved, I started having shows and printing these images in many different ways, and I was enjoying it. The process of communicating my thoughts and feelings.
Through visual means.
Through these
media.
photographs, yeah.
Okay.
And I found that it was also a more effective way to talk about the situation of
Tibet.
my Tibetan brothers and
Right,
sisters
right.
than giving lectures.
Right.
But the emotional response you can get from a photograph is obviously much stronger than
Right.
words.
Right.
So it evolved into a book that included these images. Pilgrim to me was, I mean, I'm still a pilgrim. This won't stop.
Right.
You know, this is a voyage. You know, if in some very distant world system I'm able to achieve full enlightenment, until that moment I'm a pilgrim.
That's right.
And to this, the joy of having found Buddhism, the joy and gratitude and humility of having found my teachers, something that I will never be able to repay, ever. That's the jewel.
I see. And tell me a little bit about your, Tibetan teachers and your relationship to His Holiness Dalai Lama, because many Korean peoples nowadays, they are more and more interested in Tibetan traditions, but they do not necessarily know who His Holiness is and your role.
Well, yeah, I've seen. As with any religion, whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, Muslim, whatever it may be, one must be very careful. There are teachers who aren't real, who they're charlatans, or they're only half knowledgeable, or they don't know how to teach. There can be many problems with teachers. And in the West, we've had a big problem this way of embracing teachers who are not qualified. And I think that probably is a problem in the East as well.
Yes, definitely, yes.
And I think maybe specifically with Tibetans, there have been some that were not qualified. The reason I say this is that with the Dalai Lama, here is someone who is supremely qualified to be a teacher. And having been around His Holiness close to 30 years now, I can testify that he is a completely qualified and generous and skilled teacher. Extraordinary. And the number of people who have been touched in a positive way by him is amazing. He's really one of those special beings.
Right. I remember when I first visited in Dharamsala, I had brief audience with His Holiness. And I noticed that people who had, one-on-one like eye contact with him, some of them begins to cry, and some of them begins to laugh, and they cannot explain why they are, right? And they are deeply, they are deeply happy, and they can sense something, that truly touches.
That's bodhicitta.
Right.
You're sensing the bodhicitta, that really deep, deep commitment. It's very rare in our lives that we're ever with anyone who only wants your happiness.
Right.
We all have agendas, don't we? The only agenda someone like the Dalai Lama has is for you to achieve happiness, and ultimately to achieve enlightenment, freedom, liberation is the greatest happiness, and ultimate liberation, Buddhahood. His only reason for being on this planet is to move us closer to that.
Right.
And you feel that. You don't feel it with your head.
That's
you feel it here.
Right.
In your emotional center. So that's why people laugh and they cry.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of your photos that I see, it has many. It has a narrative within, I feel.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, could you please tell us any interesting episode or?
Well, there's. I come from the world of drama. I tell stories.
Right.
And that is the kind of art that I like. I really don't like abstract art very much. I can appreciate it, but it doesn't, unless it's extraordinary. Like someone like Jackson Pollock, for instance, touches me deeply for some reason. But very few abstract artists really touch me. It's the story that moves me, and
sensing the delicate humanity in all of us that we all share is the story that I think I want to have somehow in these photographs. The reason why I chose them, the reason why I even took the photograph to begin with, but the reason specifically that I chose them for this project was various levels of people dealing with the problems of being in samsara, of living a life of confusion. But again, if you take away the layers of pain and suffering, that very delicate center just really touches me.
Right, like childlike.
You can see it in the worst of us.
Right.
If you look deep enough, you see that. That delicate, delicate yearning.
Right.
For freedom, for love, for compassion.
Connection.
To be belonging.
Yes.
I mean, it's innately there. That's the truth of the universe, that we are connected. We do belong.
We are.
But we've got so many layers that cover that, that we can't see it, we can't feel it. But that's, I think, what makes me want to take the photograph. Is it's there somewhere. And I'm trying to find that. I think that's why the photographs are blurred very much. Because I find that active, it's not passive to me. It's an active movement we all have towards the good, towards love, towards happiness. And that I suspect, I have a natural suspicion of photographs that are perfect.
Right. I mean, there's
perfectly lit, perfectly in focus. Doesn't feel real to me.
Right.
Doesn't have the breath of life to me. But I think it's also this tradition I come from of making movies. Movie is moving. It's in motion. You know, I think there's a Tibetan word that they use for humans. Is a dua, I think is the word for it, which means one who moves. He who moves. You know, and that's what we're always moving. We never stop.
That's right. Let's just talk about the Gear Foundation. You know, among all the humanitarian works that the foundation had involved, what was the most meaningful work for you? And tell us, you know, generally, you know, what it is, and for Korean audience.
Well, the foundation, I started kind of reluctantly.
Oh, okay.
Because I had already started Tibet House and a few other organizations. And I was very happy with some of the things we had done, many of the things we had done. I found them a little bit cumbersome. So I found that I could move quicker if I had my own foundation that I controlled completely. Then if something was needed, I could get the money there, get the energy there very quickly.
Right.
So that was the original impulse. As to the works we do, obviously anything to do with Tibetans and with Buddhism in general, we tend to get involved with. Anything to do with human rights, we tend to get involved with. With civil rights, we get involved with. With health issues, we get very involved with. Education, we get involved with. These are disaster relief, very important things to me. Anything, because of the way we set up the foundation, really anything that touches me, and I have the resources to help, I can go there.
Ah, I see.
I often think about the things that maybe have been the most effective that I've done. And I think the work that we did with HIV/AIDS, specifically in India, did make a huge difference. I was involved with the AIDS crisis from the early days of that in New York City. And I think what we learned and the mistakes that we all made and the mistakes we allowed our government to make at that
in the
point.
80s.
Terrible time.
Right.
Terrible time for the homosexual community. Terrible time for just anyone who was sick with this disease. It was terrible. And something we should regret and feel very sad that we did in America. In any event, I think we learned a lot from that. And I felt it was important that I helped India through that same crisis.
And make sure that they don't repeat the same mistake that
We could go way past.
Right.
I mean, they had no health infrastructure. So, and great prejudice,
right.
sexual prejudice in
That's
India.
right, yeah.
I think that's probably true in much of Asia. But India was could be very, very conservative about these things. Even doctors were horrible to people who are
Really?
HIV positive.
Wow.
To this day still, but I think we made a huge movement in terms of stigma reduction and the use of media in just telling that different story, a human story, and letting people know the truth about HIV/AIDS. So that I think was very powerful.
Okay.
The other thing, which in the end may be even the most important, long term, was our ability to sponsor Buddhist books and translations.
Oh, okay.
Of many teachers of mine, specifically His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but many other traditions within the Tibetan sphere of Buddhism. Many of them by teachers I have in the present. That to me may be in the end the most important. The ability to read a book and be transformed by it fundamentally.
And share that knowledge too.
And that can be passed on to many people. The intimacy of reading a book quietly and
it's very personal.
It is.
Yeah.
And the transformative possibility of a book.
Right.
You know, whether it is now on an iPad or it's in an actual physical book. But to make that available to people, I think is something I feel very, very happy about.
You know, unlike Tibet, where Buddhism happened to be the dominant religions, the Korean people have several options when it comes to choosing one's own faith. Although many peoples are very respectful of other people's faith, but unfortunately some peoples are not. So I wonder, what can both Buddhists and Christian do to promote mutual understanding, and also to eradicate sort of like narrow-minded religious fundamentalism?
Look, this exists in Buddhism as well.
I know.
I mean, this is crazy.
That's why I included Buddhism too.
But it is crazy.
Yes.
I mean, it's like I certainly have seen attitudes from one school of Buddhism to another.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Thinking that they don't know anything.
Right.
They're lower than us.
Right. Even though it's all about compassion.
Of course. I mean, it's so ridiculous. When I see this attitude, the Mahayanas to the Theravadins and the
even within one
even with
tradition.
Mahayana. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right.
Ridiculous. And there's no real teacher who would allow that of his students. Is that all of these ideas, religions, philosophies, psychologies are there to help people. And if they help them, that's perfect. As long as it's about love, compassion, bodhicitta, wisdom. If it includes them, it's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, like, how would your parents respond? I mean, what did they say when you say, I am very interested in Buddhism, and I may, follow Buddhist path?
Well, we talked about this. My mother and father are very open.
Right.
And very much Methodist Protestants, but of a not a closed variety, very open. That it really is about love and compassion for them. They choose to acknowledge the side of Jesus Christ that is really about a being who is a love being, one who is compassionate and all-inclusive, that everyone is welcome.
So as long as you are, trying to strive toward, love and compassion, all-inclusiveness.
Well, also in respect everyone else, of course. It's not. You and I have an affinity for Buddhism, for whatever reason, probably previous lives.
Right.
But it fits for us. It works.
Yes.
There's some people it's not going to fit.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But it should be the other way around. It's like some religions, whether it's Christianity or Muslim or whatever it may be, it may well fit for them, and that's great if it's taking them to a place of more openness, more inclusion.
But what if they, step forward and saying that, our way is the only way, and your way will lead to hell?
But that's obviously not a real religion then.
Okay.
I mean, that's so small. The thinking is so small.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that Jesus Christ would be happy with that.
Right.
I don't think Muhammad would be
Right.
happy with that thinking. I don't think,
The Buddha.
the Buddha, of course,
Yeah.
would not be.
Yeah.
It's like there are 84,000 possibilities from the Buddhist point of view of teaching Dharma, teaching the truth. And, that's anything that gets you to the next place on that voyage, on the pilgrimage, to complete openness and freedom, where we are completely loving and wise. That's good.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. You can call it Buddhism, you can call it Christianity, whatever. I don't care.
Right. And at that moment you meet. I mean, that's when, whether I'm Christians, whether you're Buddhist, whether you're Muslim, when we are all sharing that loving, compassion, inclusiveness that I recognize in your eyes and in her eyes, then that's where I think we can begin to communicate.
Look, the Dalai Lama is very careful with, especially going to the West, and the first thing he usually says, especially to a mixed crowd that is not necessarily Buddhist, but they're interested in Buddhism, he cautions them and says, "Stay with your religion."
That's right.
He always does that. He says, "It can be very dangerous. Stay with your own religion." I said, "Look, if in the end it's just not giving you what you want, of course we'll give what we have and see if it can help you."
Right.
But I've never seen him proselytize in any way whatsoever Buddhism.
So he doesn't push.
Not at all.
Right.
It's not possible.
Right. Only when you're ready and when you feel motivated.
If you have an affinity for it and it can help you,
that's right.
Great. It's here.
Right.
It's here. But we don't go like this.
Right.
You take or go like that
right.
and pull it in. It's just not the way.
Right.
This is very soft what we do. With ourselves too.
And considerate.
We have to be soft with ourselves, we're soft with other people. This is the way of nonviolence. This is soft. This is the way you achieve true transformation internally and externally. It's a very soft and loving hand we have to have. We have to be forgiving to ourselves.
That's right, yeah.
And to everyone else.
And most Westerners, they don't know much about Korean Buddhism, even though we do have a living Zen traditions, living Sun traditions. In your opinion, what can Korean Buddhists do to better promote Korean tradition in the West?
Well, it's sending teachers. It all comes from the teachers, doesn't it? The Dalai Lama is a great teacher. I doubt that Tibetan Buddhism would be known today without the Dalai Lama. But he is such an extraordinary teacher and has achieved so much himself in this lifetime that he's had an enormous impact. But other Tibetan teachers also who have gone to the West, who have gone to other places in Asia, have had enormous impact. It comes from the teachers.
Right.
But it's not even necessary. I don't say that in terms of, Korean teachers have to go around the world. If they feel like it,
right.
Part of their motivation to do it.
If there's affinity.
That's great.
Right.
Yeah, it's not necessary.
Right.
It's not necessary at all. I was looking at one of those, the large book you had on temple stays. And obviously you used pictures in there that had Westerners
right.
That were practicing here in Dharma centers here and temples here. It's hard to know the resonances of that kind of thing. But one student who ends up having an experience that takes them to the next place in a Korean temple, that resonance, it can go through generations of that one person who's been touched.
Right.
So I think this openness that you and I discussed already of inviting in a very loving way and a very aesthetic way. That's a beautiful book of the aesthetics of coming to a Korean temple. The great meal that we had
yesterday
is something I won't forget. I think this speaks to the modern mind and the modern heart in a very profound way.
Have you studied the Heart Sutra? Like in to what extent have you engaged with?
Well, His Holiness has given many commentaries on that, and I've read many commentaries on that.
like, do you have you learned to apply some of those, like philosophy of Madhyamika or emptiness to your daily life?
Yeah, I mean, these are profound things that,
Right.
that a beginning student like myself.
You are beginning students?
Absolutely.
After 30 years?
Absolutely. I mean, these are extraordinary. Look, and we're also a beginning culture, too, in the West. So in a way, we're still the pioneering generation. I'm 61. And it was only in the 1950s, where I was just a small boy, is when the beginnings really of Buddhism were taking hold in America. So this is really still the first beginning, maybe, of the second generation of Buddhist students. So we don't have much maturity in this area yet. It hasn't settled. I think Korean Buddhism, I'm sure, is much more mature in the depth of their knowledge and the way it's integrated into every part of your life. I think what we do have in the West is an enthusiasm.
Right.
And a willingness to question more, I think, to engage in debate. That's part of our tradition. And I think that fits very good with the Tibetan tradition of debate. Of let's hammer it out. Let's see, let's unpack the concept and find a way to use concepts, words, language to approach shunya. Very difficult, obviously, almost impossible to explain. But there have been great teachers who've tried. We talked about Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and Shantideva, the great teachers of my tradition, which I'm sure are important to your tradition as well.
Yes. What are some of your future goals as a Buddhist and as an actor and also as an artist? And also family.
I mean, family
and dad.
Family to me is in this life probably my major responsibility, and I take that on with great joy. I love being a father. I love being a husband, and the challenges of that are real, and very in line with what I would want to achieve as a serious Buddhist. That more compassion, more sense of genuine universal responsibility, more sense of real love and concern. In the context of a family, it's what better place to genuinely start to develop those things. And then obviously move out from there. If you can go past that kind of biological unit into the visionary unit of all sentient beings, with that same kind of fervor, same kind of commitment and emotion. But it really does go out to everyone in layers, not only in this universe, but all other universes, and outside of time, past the three times, past, present, and future, and then even outside of the three times. This is why we incarnate. This is why we're here.
Lastly, is there any final message that you want to give it to our Korean Buddhist viewers in general?
I don't know Koreans well enough to have that direct communication. And I would wish that this is the beginning of my experiences with Korea. And I'm open to learning so much. One thing as I get older, I realize is that this sense of being a beginner at all times is really important.
Yeah, beginner's minds.
It's really important in everything. As an actor, as a Buddhist practitioner, whatever it is, what am I doing? Every day there's so much to learn, so much.
Okay. So the last question is the Buddhist television network is in the early stage of creating Buddhism-inspired cable channel network in the U.S. And His Holiness Dalai Lama has blessed us with his acceptance as an honorary patron of BTN World.
That's great.
So could you please, give a short message or encouragement and blessing for this meaningful project?
Buddhist Television Network World. What a great concept. If the motivation is pure, which I'm assuming it is, this can have an enormous positive effect
on not only this planet but other planets as well. This can be a really wonderful thing. And there's an enormous amount of material, you know, from already now a century of teachers.
That's right. Yeah.
Of
So many.
of films that and videos that have been done, that can now be shared with everyone. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary. So I wish you, you know, lots of luck and Godspeed, as they say. That this be really of value to all of us. Thank you for doing that.
Yes. I would like to thank you one more time for, you know, coming to having an interview with us, and please, you know, have a pleasant stay in Korea.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Gere has practiced every day for over 30 years. With the guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama as his teacher, Richard Gere continues to spread loving kindness and happiness to the weak and those who are suffering. As he wrote in the message book, "May all sentient beings live in peace and happiness," Richard Gere continues to spread the Buddha Dharma through loving kindness.